And the underlying issue seems to be selfishness. What now to break the cycles of selfishness in all dimensions and for all categories of presence inside those dimensions? What now? How do we crack this very difficult nut, crack the nut of selfishness? How? What now? Right now, apparently, there's what's being called a caravan of approximately 4,500 to 5,000 people from Central America who are walking through Mexico to try to get to the United States.
That's true.
They include 2,300 children. It's primarily children and women, and they're walking to the United States, and the people in Mexico are helping them a little bit. They're not starving. They're being given a little bit of food every place they go, and they were hoping for buses, but no buses have showed up. It's primarily a children's crusade, and they're walking to escape violence. There was one mother who was interviewed, and she had left her 2 sons in Honduras with her own mother, and she was really sad about leaving them, but she said it wasn't safe for her daughter to be growing up in Honduras where rape is everywhere, and she needed to get her daughter out of there. So she was left with this horrible choice of what to do, and she's choosing to walk from Honduras to the United States with her daughter to try to get her daughter someplace where she hopefully won't be raped as a part of daily life.
That's true.
And she had to leave her 2 sons behind because it was too much to take all 3 of them. She's walking.
That's true.
And apparently on some of the propaganda machines that play in the United States, this caravan is being labeled as an invasion. And obviously we do need to respond to it. We need to be building a tent city. We need to be prepared to have 5,000 women and children showing up, and hopefully a couple of men with them.
That's
because
true.
It would be nice if there was somebody with some strength who wasn't taking care of children actively to help make something come together. So hopefully some men with them.
That's true.
But it's a population in need. And where are the churches on this? Why aren't the churches putting a plan of action together? Because apparently the Trump administration's response is to send 5,000 active military personnel to the border to meet less than 5,000 women and children who are walking.
That's true.
And that's not what the situation actually calls for, and it looks horrifyingly selfish.
That's true.
And now they're talking about this thing they've been talking about for about a week, where we think it's possible that over time resources are actually being evenly allocated, and what's being left out of the equation is reincarnation.
That's true.
So that if we are born into a life of the haves, like in North America and Europe, we're in the haves. We have electricity, we have indoor plumbing, we have easily available food, we have clean water to drink, we have, for the most part, safe places in which to sleep. We're haves. We're wealthy by worldly and historic standards.
That's true.
If we're part of the haves, we've been given resources, and if we blow through them really quickly, then we're going to have a lot of rebirths where we have no resources given to us.
That's true, because we spent them.
We've already used them up. And so the more respectful we are of the resources that, after all, are here for all of us in the biosphere to share, all of us, not just humans.
That's true.
The more respectful we are of the resources, the shorter our time will need to be on the yin and yang of the have-nots. Now, obviously, we're probably going to need to have one of those short lives to just be reminded, oh, that's right, here we are, there's no plumbing, there's chickens running in and out, there's a dirt floor, this is how we live, and it's okay because this is how our neighbors live also.
That's true.
And then to move through that cycling quickly, when we are born into the cycle of halves, we're here to make a change. We're here to equalize the system so that the next time we're born on the side of the have-nots, it's less of a dive off the cliff.
That's true.
And what seems to be happening instead is that when people are born into the side of the haves, they let go of the master plan of cycling, and they pretend they're always going to be born on the side of the haves, or sometimes they pretend that they're going to live forever, or sometimes they pretend that they're not going to come back. It's crazy. There's all kinds of complete disconnects of the reality of reincarnation, which again, there's so much documentation on it that anybody who argues with the reality of reincarnation sounds ignorant and like they don't want to acknowledge what's going on. And probably the next thing they're going to deny is gravity, so you need to stay away from those people. Somebody's saying they're probably denying the laws of thermodynamics, and they're talking about caloric intake and the relationship between weight, exercise, and food, which is again just formulaic, and we can argue about it all we want. And all of us would like to be thinner, we who have access to food. Even our goose eats too much. Everybody eats too much. Horses, when they're no longer racing, they don't exercise. They stand around and become very lovely lawn ornaments.
That's true.
Eating and pooping. And so this is how we all are. It's not to single out humans, but we as humanity, and specifically the higher powers who are working with humanity, we want to consider that we are somehow evolved over, quote, lesser life forms, unquote, when the facts really don't hold that up. We still act the same. We act like chickens or geese or bacteria. We overeat and overbreed and overrun the container, and then populations crash.
That's true.
For whom is the message, and why do you ask? They're still tapping on the Angela Merkel neo-Nazi and the Central American caravans, and they're saying how Europe and North America right now have the same issue, where the have-nots are beginning the migration to the have countries, and this of course will be amplified as climate change floods the low-lying have-not countries, as the have-nots will continue to flood into the have regions, and to really remember that we're here to learn to share. We've got to learn to share, and we give lip service to this topic in kindergarten and first grade.
That's true.
But we don't set the example of sharing. For whom is the message? And why do you ask? And again, the pencil point is tapping, and our Ra used to say that it was too hard to crack this nut of selfishness, that this underlying issue of selfishness was just not budging, and he said if we can just get people to think long term, then they will do the right thing, taking into account their own selfish interests, as long as they're thinking long term. And he was of course right in that over the long haul, we only get so many resources, all of us. It looks like that's actually the system, and we think that's a good system.
Yeah, that's true.
Which means if we blast through it and we're stingy with our resources in this life, we already used our resources for maybe the next 20 or 30 or 40 lives, if you look at how much North Americans and Europeans use with regard to other humans and non-humans.
That's true.
For whom is the message, and why do you ask? So friends, we really need to call upon the religious leaders and the church leaders of the day and say there is a need on the southern border of the United States to have places for the refugees to stay. And if we're having a hard time working through the issues on the northern side of the border, attempt to set up tent cities on the southern side of the border, attempt to make a safe place for these people to stay who are fleeing violence and poverty and lives that are not working.
That's true.
And to remember that we're going to be reborn there, and to just have that long-term thinking in our consciousnesses that presumably the North Americans will be reborn into the terrible places in South America that are and Central America who are trying to get to the North American safer places.
That's true.
That the cycle will be as close to home as possible, and the Europeans will presumably be reborn into the Middle Eastern places that are trying to get to safer places.
That's true.
It's the same cycling. The haves are forgetting that they're going to be reborn as a have-not. And so think about it, friends. If you were in such a situation that you would be willing to walk from Honduras to the United States, which through those parts of Mexico, the roads are in bad enough condition that it's not even advised that you drive.
That's true.
So that's tough going, and to do it carrying children. Those are not good situations that you're leaving. That's not good. And if you were in that situation, how would you want to be greeted when you arrived at the promised land, quote unquote? And to see that this same journey is happening interdimensionally as well. And when we take into account the interdimensional nature of reality, it starts to look exceedingly short-sighted for us to be cruel and stingy. And that's what we're being as a country. We're being stingy, and we're upholding stinginess when actually stinginess and selfishness is a perversion of what we're supposed to be.
That's true.
It's something gone awry. It's a distortion of what's supposed to occur. And now what do we do? What now to break the cycles of selfishness? What do we do? I know the point. So the point is that Angela Merkel is still the planetary consciousness, and she still has the job, and she understands that a compassionate approach to refugees is what the situation calls for, and in response the people of Europe are rising up and electing neo-Nazis.
That's the point.
And so it's not looking good for the people of Europe. They're sadly no less selfish than the people of North America.
That's true.
And Angela is still correct, and she's saying we've got to be compassionate and we've got to learn to share. And those are the things that we give lip service to in kindergarten and first grade. Now, when are we going to learn it? How do we get people to learn it? What now? How are you going to get resources to Angela Merkel? How?